Greetings and welcome back to Old Ways Rising Farm YouTube channel. Today I want to talk a little bit about troubleshooting when you're doing a fat liquor dressed or brain tan leather project. Now, we recently put out a video on the whole process of doing this. I'm not going to go over all of those details. That's there for you. I'll put a link up at the top of the screen if you want to go see it, if you haven't yet. But this is the actual piece of hide that we worked in that video. And you can see it's a real light, drapey, loose, fluffy hide. Okay? If I take it in my hands, it has a lot of stretch to it. Okay? And if I kind of hold it up on my fingers, you can see it just drapes right over nice. Okay? This is what we want. This is what you want in a really nice hide. Now, I was working on another one a week after making that, and to be completely honest with you, I was rushing, right? I was rushing to get this done, and then I got called into work on a day I wasn't expecting, and just trying to get everything put away and finished, and it didn't come out so nice. So this is not soft enough to be a finished hide. There's two ways it cannot be soft enough. One is if the internal structure is not stretchy enough, right? So if I give this a stretch, even stretching with all I can, it's barely moving, right? It doesn't have the bounce that the other nice one has. And you know, if I kind of put this on my fingers in the same way, you see it's just sticking out here. It's not draping down. And it probably won't pick up in the camera for you to hear, but when I wrinkle it, it still has a little bit of crinkly.
We can hear that.
You can hear that, you think? Right?
Yeah.
It's still got some of that crinkly rawhide crinkle to it. Okay? So that's one way it cannot be soft enough. The other way it cannot be soft enough I have up here. In this region here at the neck skin, got a big old hole. That's from the harvesting of this animal in the first place. And right around this hole I didn't get all of the grain off. So this actually softened up quite nice in terms of having the normal amount of stretch for the neck region, which is never as much as for the body. But the surface texture is hard. It's got a really, tough, gristly surface texture to it. So we deal with these in different ways. The good news is that you can always work with one of these hides. If it doesn't come out perfect, you're fine. Right? You can always work with it. None of what we're doing, because we're not doing a chemical change, we're doing a physical dressing. It's reversible and it's repeatable. So yes, I'm going to have to redo some of the work that I already did on this, but not nearly as much as the first time around. But it's completely salvageable, right? So first I want to work on this section where I left a little bit too much of the grain on. And that we simply do with a little bit of sandpaper. So this is just some 50 grit coarse sandpaper. And I'm going to take this and just go over that section that has the grain, scuff it up, and literally just sand through it. Okay? This doesn't take too awful long. Does take a little bit of elbow grease, of course, but not a huge amount. And you can do this anywhere on your hide, anywhere that the surface texture doesn't come out the way you wanted it to. You can grab some sandpaper and you can work it like that.
Question.
Yes.
Will that help the solution get in better?
Yes, in this region. Yeah. Because the grain is the waterproofing layer of the hide. So, turns out, when we remove the waterproofing, things are less waterproof.
Imagine.
I know that's shocking news to everybody who's watching and listening, but it's true. I'm already through it in that section. You know, and you can do this just if it gets a little bit of surface crispies, which will happen sometimes. You'll have a little bit of membrane on the backside or a little bit of grain here. It just gets a crispy spot. And maybe it's not something that you think is worth completely redoing, resoftening the hide for, but you want to make that one little spot a bit nicer. You can always just come in and do this. You can even come back and do this after it's smoked and redress it. There are some tanners who actually recommend that. That if you have a hide that doesn't come out quite nice, to smoke it first, which will lock all of the stuff that did come out nice into place, and then redress it. Okay? There's certainly an argument to be made for that. The argument against that right now is that we are so doggum, to use a southernism, we're just so doggum dry that it's going to be a while till I can safely build a fire and smoke anything.
Mm-hmm.
So I just want to get everything to this stage, and then whenever I get the weather, I'll do the smoking. Okay? Now, I'm not going to worry about... Is this in frame, beloved?
Yep.
Okay. I'm not going to worry about all of this over here. I'm going to have to cut around that hole anyway, and cut this little bit of a strip off when all is said and done. But this is, you know, your prime section of the hide for moccasins or gaiters or bottom of leggings or anything like that. So I don't want to lose this whole section to this big gnarly spot, right? But I'm not going to use a ton of time and obsess over the edge, because the crinkly edge is going to get cut off anyhow. Okay? So that's how we fix a spot that came out stiff because the surface was bad. Another thing some tanners will do is to take sandpaper to the entire surface just because. And it will make a really nice, soft, supple surface across the whole hide. Right? So you can do as much as you want of this, or as little as you want of this. Some will also take a pumice stone and do the same thing. If you really want to prove your caveman cred, you can do this with a piece of sandstone from the creek near you. Right? But there we go. So that's the first of my two problems taken care of. Now when I go down to this section, where you just see it just has no stretch and it's crinkly, right? That's not a problem with surface crusties. That's a problem with it not softening all the way into the core. Two causes. One is that it dried too fast and you didn't stretch it out well enough as it was drying. If that is the cause, what you do is you take a washcloth, pretend my sandpaper is a washcloth for a moment, you wet the washcloth, you put it in here, and then you just roll it up in that section, set it aside for an hour, that will damp it back, then you unroll it and restretch it. Okay? I already did that here, and it didn't come soft. That means that the problem isn't drying too fast, it's the other option, which is not enough fats got all the way into the core to release all of the protein fibers from the glycoproteins in those regions. Okay? So it's not just a function of drying too fast, it's a function of not enough dressing liquor. So, if the problem is not enough dressing liquor, what do you think we do, beloved?
Put it back in there.
We put it back in some more dressing liquor, right? Very, very simple. So, I have here a bucket with enough warm water. Warm is good. It can be cold. What you don't want is hot. You should be able to hold your hand in here for an hour and not have it burn, right? If it's bad for your skin, it's bad for this skin. So don't ever subject one of your hides to something that your own hands are going to be uncomfortable with. Right? And then I made another batch of my dressing liquor here. And I made this at the level of 1/2 cup of each ingredient, 1/2 cup of grated soap, 1/2 cup of oil, 1/2 cup of water. Okay, we're just going to mix this in here real good. Got a couple of soap globs that didn't fully work loose. That's okay. They will dissolve over time. Okay. Now I'm not messing around. If you want to get all of this out, with putting it on the hide as a paste because I don't need to. So in the original video, when this was still rawhide, that's good enough, it was so stiff, most of the work that we did on this was just relaxing it to the point that it can absorb water. This is already at the point that it can absorb water. It didn't get quite as soft as I want, but it's still very, very absorptive. So, all I need to do is make my mixture, put it in here. I used a full cup of the full cup of each ingredient in the original, but it's mostly done, right? I just need to damp back and fully hydrate. You can see how some spots have already fully absorbed. Others haven't, but they're all white. None of it is that yellow color that you get in rawhide. Okay, so yes, these spots that didn't fully absorb, that's what needs to really sit here and soak. Okay, so I'm just going to set it in here, and a few times today I will come and knead it around and work it and make sure everything's getting everywhere. I'm going to let this soak overnight, and then I will stretch it dry again in the morning. Okay, so if any spots refuse to absorb, I'll work them over the stick, right? Like there's a tough spot. That may or may not fully absorb the liquor without a little working. If it needs a little working, I'll give it a little working. That's fine. Okay? And as I mentioned in the original video, since this is soap and oil, you don't need to worry about spoilage. You don't need to worry about it going rancid on you. It's just soap and oil. It's happy and fine. So there's my hide in its special little bubble bath. If you want to see how I made this recipe in the first place, again, go check the original video. I'm going to knead it around a few times, maybe work it a little, and I'll see you tomorrow when there's something else to show. So it is officially the next day. I've had this soaking for about 24 hours, and I really haven't had to do anything else to it. So when I first put it in the water, you could see those regions that hadn't fully absorbed, hadn't fully relaxed, and they were showing up as crinkly spots or like little patches of dark coloration. And at this point, those have all completely disappeared. You can see what's going on. The hide will tell you if it's ready or not, right? It really will. You can look for those differences. What you want to see is homogeneity. Every hide's going to be a little bit different, but the hide should be homogeneous within itself. It should all be a consistent color. It should be a consistent texture. As I'm looking at this, you know, these areas here in the middle that were stiff before, you know, if I poke my fingers into it, it's kind of holding its shape, right? So at this stage, when it's fully saturated, that's what it should do. Just with finger pressure, I'm stretching out that mesh, and because it's wet, it doesn't have the spring back, and it's holding that stretch, okay? And as I'm running my fingers across the whole hide, front and back, I can see that it's consistent, right? That's what we want to see. Now here at this next section, right here is where I was working with the sandpaper. And it looks like there's a couple little ribbons that I didn't sand all the way through, but nothing that looks like it's going to be a problem. And this is completely absorbed, the fat liquor, and is very, very supple. Okay? So it's time to let dry. Now, some people will roll this up in a tube and wring it out. I have some activities I need to get on with for today, and to be totally honest, I would just assume it took an hour or two to get all the surface moisture off. So what I'm just going to do is hang it over this here section of fence. I'm going to ring it with my just hand and fingers there to get all of the real soupy water off. There's a little bit of oil scum coming off. That's just fine. So I'm just going to do a partial ring. I'm not going to do a real harsh ringing.
Still getting a lot of water off that.
Still getting a lot of water out of it. Yeah, these things are extremely water absorptive.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of the characteristics of the material. You cannot waterproof buckskin. It is just a bath towel absorbent. It has always been bath towel absorbent. It will always be bath towel absorbent. Okay. A little bit of scummy oil there. Okay. There you go. And now I'm just going to leave this draped. It's going to dry off fairly quickly. And in an hour or so or two, when I finish my other day's activities, it'll be ready to start stretching and drying and stretching and drying and stretching and drying. So, here we are. We're about 3/4 dry. I left it hang there on the line, so to speak. Did learn a lesson. That little streak there is staining from the lichens. Quite a few lichens have yellow dye in them, so
Oops.
that doesn't. Oops. Yeah, you know, you live, you learn. Anyway, that little oops, it won't be the end of the world because the smoke, when we smoke this, is going to, you know, stain it a yellowish color anyway, so it's not going to be that prominent. But, note to self, if you have lichens on your stick that you're hanging it from, pick another stick. Okay. Now, this is working out quite nicely. I've just been stretching and drying and stretching and drying and stretch it for a few minutes, then walk away for an hour and do some other little project. And it's coming out quite nicely. So this next section, where we did the sanding, that's stretching out quite nicely. There's a little bit of uneven coloration because I didn't sand absolutely all the way through the grain in a few spots, but that's okay. Again, the smoke will even that out quite a bit. And it's nice, soft, stretchy now. And, you know, also on these thick sections, you're going to use that for some high wear part anyway. So, don't worry about it, right? Move on with life. The key thing at this stage is consistency. Okay? As you're doing these projects, especially when you're doing these projects for the first time, you want to observe whatever change that's happening, see it happen, see what that change looks like, and look for consistency in that change, right? The look and the feel of this isn't going to 100% pick up on camera, and I can't 100% describe it to you. It's a tactile thing, but you have to get your hands in, you have to feel it, right? You have to see how it feels, see how it looks, see how it stretches, and then you want it to feel, look, and stretch evenly across the whole piece, right? And that's your good sign of success. So for now, it's just more of the same. It's going to be several more hours of just drying and stretching. And a lot of it is just kind of this light hand stretching, but also you want to get in here and really stretch that out in both directions a few times periodically. Just keep it as stretched out as you possibly can. You know, do some of this stretch on your knees like that. Both directions. Then grab it, caddy corner, stretch it, caddy corner, you know, and then turn it the other way, stretch it that caddy corner, and the other catty corner, and just make sure that you're going, all of those angles, sideways, vertical, and both 45s all the way evenly across the piece, right? Keep it stretched out, keep moving. You do that, you'll have a nice soft hide, okay? And this is going to be several more hours. It'll probably be dark till I get this all the way done. I kind of like to do this as sort of get to this stage as the evening, because this is where it gets tedious, and it's not sloppy, it's not messy, it's not rubbing oil residue on anything anymore. So I can just sit in the living room and watch something on YouTube and just fiddle with this, Just keep doing this while I'm watching something or doing some other mindless thing, right? So I'm going to keep doing this mindless thing, and I'll show you the final product when it is ready. So here we go. It's the next day. It is all dried out, and you can see if I give it the prop on the fingers test, it's got the same nice drape that the original one had. The crinkly sections are no longer crinkly. It's got a nice stretch and bounce, and it's a nice hide, okay? So, don't despair if something doesn't go right. Again, I've said it earlier, I'll say it again. This process, every part of it, is both reversible and repeatable, okay? You're never out anything by doing this, right? If it doesn't come out the way you wanted, you can just do another soak, you can wet it back, do another stretch, or you can do both, right? It's all good. And all that it costs you is a little bit of extra time, but that's just time well spent, well invested in learning how to get the outcome that you want, right? And you do this right, it is such a nice soft leather, it's amazing, right?
Feels like a flannel.
Yeah, it really does. Like really, really nice flannel. So, I hope you enjoyed this. I hope that if this is the first video that you watch, that you go back and watch the video on making this in the first place, because that's where all the explanation and the detail is. And I hope that you will join us next time here at Old Ways Rising Farm.